elections might be over. However, it seems that concern about the low voter turnout isn't. Less than half of those who had registered to vote actually had cast their vote in these 2021 local government elections, and they're balanced in the last week's polls. Now, there are millions who did not even bother to register at this point. But the IEC's Mosotho joins us now for more on this, as well as related matters to the IEC, the results and more. Mr. Moepya, good to have you, and a very warm good morning to you. I mean, I'm sure such a relief that the elections are finally over, but equally lessons, I'm sure, learned here by the organization, given that this was your very first local government election under a pandemic. You had little time to actually prep. You did your level best. Are you satisfied with the work of the IEC this past weeks?
Thank you, Tumelo, and good morning to you and your viewers. Every election is a very different election. This election was particularly different and difficult. The pandemic was something that we had to deal with. Clearly, we prepare for elections in advance. There were stops and goes in this election, but given all of that, we are very satisfied with the way that the election has been conducted.
Yeah. Is there any reason to believe that the credibility of the IEC might have been tested during these elections? I mean, I'm sure you know that you have been inundated with concerns around so much that has happened, from, the voting polling stations, with ballot papers, with cases around some of your presiding officers, all the way to voter counting, some ballot boxes found in taxis, places that they were not meant to be. Any concern whatsoever around the questioning of the credibility of the IEC?
I think, Tumelo, one must look at the sentiment in the country generally. The sentiment is negative. On a factual basis, this elections had the least incident of ballot incidents. It had the least incidents of us being broken into and people stealing our material and vandalizing it. But because the sentiment is generally negative, there is a sense that we have not done well. The HSRC has undertaken a research and looking at state institutions generally and how they are perceived, political parties. Generally, they have come to the understanding that, or the finding that, the sentiment is negative. On our part, we are one of those institutions where though sentiment has dropped, confidence in the work that we do is still high. And I must admit, on a factual basis, this election was indeed better.
Right. Speaking of low aspects that you have encountered, low voter turnout must have been one of your lowest, I'm sure, since the dawn of democracy. I mean, what would you attribute that to? We've spoken about this a bit earlier on with various experts right here on eNCA, whether power outages were the cause, whether it was voter apathy, whether, community members were just absolutely disgruntled with various political parties. Hence, they either chose to not register at all, or some registered but chose not to still pitch up at the voting polls and vote. But as the IEC and the data that you have come up with in trying to understand low voter turnout this time around, what have you found?
Tumelo, that's not a question we can answer today. The work we had undertaken was to understand how satisfied were the people that came to vote. What we are now going to do is going to find out why people have not come. And I think it's an important part of the work that all of us must do. I don't think we must rely on messages that are on Twitter, on things that have just been written without evidence that backs them up. This is an important phenomenon where persons have, in many instances, simply stayed home and never come to vote. We need to understand what it is that needs to be done to have them back at the voting stations. I suspect it may have to do with satisfaction by those that they had previously elected into office. But it's suspicion. There is no basis for it. One has to do work that is factual and then publish that work.
Absolutely, and we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Mr. Mosotho, for joining us this morning and having this conversation with us, IEC Commissioner Mosotho.